"Ma'am, I don't want money. I just want to fix your car for a hot meal. 1 plate. For her." The garage stilled. Wrenches dropped. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the man at the threshold, graying gaunt, grease-stained shirt clinging to his frame. One hand held the calloused fingers of a quiet little girl in an oversized hoodie. The other pointed calmly at the silver BMW Z8 on the lift. Brooke Hamilton blinked twice. She had come here expecting a 10-minute diagnostic and a latte to go. Not. Whatever this was. The foreman chuckled loud and sharp. "You lost, old man." "I'm not Jack Turner," replied voice, quiet, eyes steady. "But your diagnosis is." The tension in the air thickened. The team had been scratching their heads for 2 hours running scan tools and swapping relays. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree every time they tried to start the car. Brooke folded her arms sharply, tailored blazer catching the late sun through the open bay door. "You think you know what's wrong." Jack didn't flinch. "I know it by sound." The little girl beside him, barefoot in beat-up sneakers, hair tucked behind her ears, held his gaze like he was the last steady thing in a storm. Brooke almost sighed. This day had already been a disaster. The investor lunch canceled her assistant late, and now her vintage collector's car, her one splurge, refusing to start. And yet, something about the man stopped her. He wasn't posturing. He didn't beg. He stood like someone who used to command space now, just trying not to take up any. And the little girl. Ellie. He'd said. Something in the girl's eyes was too quiet for a child that young, too observant. Brooke's inner voice, the one trained in boardrooms and billion-dollar bets, whispered, "This is a liability." But another voice, one deeper, older, murmured, "Let's see what happens." She sighed. 5 minutes. Impress me." Jack gave a single nod. "That's all I need." He handed Ellie his backpack, then walked toward the BMW with the reverence of a man approaching a chapel. No tools, no scanners, just instinct. He circled the car once slowly, like listening with his feet. Then he opened the driver's door and slid in the leather, groaning beneath him. He closed his eyes. Placed 2 fingers gently on the dash just above the ignition. The garage held its breath. He leaned in, whispered barely audible, "Talk to me." A beat, then another. Jack's eyes fluttered open. Faulty throttle position sensor. Faking a misfire cascade. Your ECU thinks it's protecting the engine. It's not. He stepped out, reached for a socket wrench from the startled mechanic beside him, and ducked under the hood with practiced grace. 3 minutes, 2 screws, 1 wire harness delicately cleaned and reconnected. "Try it now," he said. The foreman turned the key. The BMW roared to life, smooth clean like it had been born to run. A stunned silence followed. Then someone shouted, "Yo, I got that," on video. Phones rose. A low whistle rippled through the team. Brooke felt her mouth open, then close again. Her heart did something it hadn't done in weeks. It skipped. She stepped closer. "What's your name?" "Jack Turner," he said. "And hers?" "Ellie," he said softer now. "My daughter." Brooke glanced at the girl. Ellie offered a shy half-smile, then tucked herself behind her father's leg. "You worked in auto repair?" Brooke asked, tone still clipped, but now, less armor, more curiosity. "No," Jack said simply. "I used to race." Before she could ask more, the foreman muttered, "Where'd you learn throttle harmonics like that?" Jack looked down, shrugging. "You spend enough nights alone with broken things, you start to hear what they're really saying." The team chuckled nervously. Brooke didn't. She studied his face again, the creases at his eyes, the soot-streaked jawline, the way he stood like someone used to being blamed for things he couldn't fix. But, most of all, she studied Ellie. The girl was now holding a tiny, crumpled napkin. On it, a sketch rough, childish, but clear, a man standing beside a car, a tiny crown above his head. He didn't look like a beggar in that drawing. He looked like a king. Brooke folded her arms again. Come back tomorrow. I'll pay you in meals if you help clean up my fleet. Jack hesitated. 1 day only. We'll see, she said, then added against every impulse in her carefully curated personality, I could use someone who listens. Jack met her eyes. For a moment, there was something ancient and almost broken in them, but also a flicker of something else. Hope. He nodded once, then turned back to Ellie. She reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently like she was his anchor in the storm. As they walked away, Brooke found herself still watching them long after they'd gone. She didn't know who he really was, didn't know what he'd lost, didn't know that the internet would soon call him the Engine Whisperer. All she knew was this: the car worked. The man didn't lie, and something about that father and daughter made her want to believe in second chances again. This guy fixed a CEO's BMW in 5 minutes. No tools, just listen to it. Somebody find this man. The video had only been online for 8 hours, but it was already everywhere. Hashtags were piling up. BMW Whisperer, Gajiu Garage Angel, you homeless. Hero, and the name on everyone's lips wasn't a name at all. It was a whisper. JT didn't own a phone. He didn't know he'd gone viral. He just knew Ellie had drawn something new this morning. She had sat on the broken pew of the chapel they'd been sleeping in, an old Methodist church with stained glass sunbeams and ivy swallowing the stone. Her pencil moved in slow, careful strokes. Is that me again? JT asked, sipping black coffee from a chipped thermos. Ellie nodded without looking up. He smiled. You always draw me better than I am. She tilted her head, then held up the paper. This time it was him in coveralls, oil on his hands, sweat on his brow, but on his head sat a crooked crown made of spark plugs. He laughed softly. A king of broken things, huh? Ellie just grinned proud, then curled up beside him like she used to when nights were colder than silence. Later that day, just past noon, the wind picked up on the side of Route 17. A beat-up Subaru wagon rattled to a stop on the shoulder, steam rising from the hood like an angry spirit. Inside, Ben Reyes, a public defender in his 30s, still in his courtroom shirt and loosened tie, fumbled with his hazard lights. His son, Lucas, whimpered in the back seat. Feverish, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. "Hang on, buddy," Ben said, heart-pounding. "We'll figure it out." He popped the hood. Smoke, burnt coolant, a shredded serpentine belt. He cursed under his breath. Just then, a man with salt and pepper stubble and oil-stained boots stepped out of the tree line, a child's hand in his. "You need help?" the man asked. Ben turned, startled. "Yeah, do you know cars?" Jack Turner simply looked at the engine. His eyes narrowed, not in frustration but in familiarity. "Overheated. Your tensioner pulley gave out through the belt," he said, wiping his hands on a rag pulled from his back pocket. "Got a few tools back in the chapel." Ben blinked. "The chapel?" Jack gestured toward the treetops. "Old place. We stay there." "You got a bottle of water in the glove box," Ben said. Jack handed the bottle to Ellie, who ran it under the car gently to cool the engine. "She's got the lightest hands," Jack explained. "Won't crack a hot block." Ben stared. Who are you?" Jack didn't answer right away. He just reached into the engine and began to work using a makeshift socket to release the tensioner, then looping an old belt from his backpack. "Patch job," Jack muttered. "Won't last a week, but it'll get your boy to the clinic." 5 minutes later, the car rumbled to life. Lucas stirred in the back seat. "Daddy," he mumbled. Ben's knees buckled in relief. "You just—" He turned to Jack, overwhelmed. "Thank you." Jack shrugged, brushing his hands off. "Just a machine." "No, that was something else," Ben said, voice thick. "Let me buy you lunch. Coffee. Something." Jack shook his head. "Just glad the kid's okay." But Ben wasn't letting it go. "You used to be a mechanic." "No," Jack said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Used to be a racer." Then he nodded toward the chapel and took Ellie's hand again. As they walked away, Ellie turned and gave Lucas a little wave. Lucas waved back with the kind of wonder reserved for storybook nights. Ben watched them disappear into the trees. A thought burned in his chest like the belt that just melted down. Someone needs to know this man. That night in the old chapel, Jack repaired a leaky pipe with a toothbrush and a tin spoon. Ellie watched from the pew, still drawing. "Did you like helping that boy?" Jack asked. She nodded, then held up her latest sketch. It was Jack kneeling by the Subaru. Behind him, instead of smoke, the engine gave off golden light. On the hood, the word Whisperer was scribbled in a child's hand. Jack stared at it. "You givin' me another nickname?" Ellie giggled silently. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Long as it ain't Grease Goblin, I guess I'll take it." Then his face softened. "You're really proud of me, huh?" She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, Jack Turner let himself believe it. Meanwhile, across town, Brooke Hamilton sat in her sleek penthouse watching the now viral TikTok for the 4th time. She froze the frame on the moment the engine started. It wasn't just the fix that fascinated her. It was the calm in his hands, the precision, like he wasn't guessing, he was listening. And that girl... Brooke leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. Who were they? And why did they seem like they'd both lived through 1,000 storms? By midnight, the internet had crowned him. The Whisperer, the mechanic monk, the BMW prophet. But Jack didn't know. He was too busy sewing up the chapel's broken curtain with dental floss and teaching Ellie how to make peanut butter sandwiches with the last of their rations. He didn't need the world to remember who he was. All he needed was for one little girl to keep drawing him like a king. And somehow, in that quiet chapel, that was enough. "Find him." Brooke Hamilton's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel through silk. Across the mahogany desk, her assistant, Trevor, blinked. "Excuse me." "The man from the garage," Brooke said, eyes locked on the paused frame of the TikTok video. "I want a name." Trevor leaned forward, unsure. "Ma'am, the video says he's just some homeless guy. No last name. Just JT. That's all anyone knows." Brooke didn't look away from the screen. The moment was burned into her memory, grease-streaked hands, sharp eyes, the exact flick of his wrist as he adjusted the engine like he was tuning a violin. "Men like that," she said slowly, "don't come from nowhere." The day after her BMW had been brought back to life, Brooke had barely slept. She'd replayed the moment more times than she cared to admit. Not because of the car, because of the silence that had followed. For a full 3 seconds, no one had moved. Not the mechanics, not the customers. It was like watching a ghost walk through a door no one had seen before. Brooke had prided herself on instinct. She could read venture capital pitches in 30 seconds, dismantle a business model in 10. But that man... There was something underneath the stillness. A weight, a history. And the girl quiet, watchful, unafraid of engines or eyes. Who were they? 2 hours later, her email pinged. Subject, possible match, JT, a.k.a. Jack Turner. She opened the attachment, then froze. Name, Jack Turner, Dobb, August 14th, 1976. Profession, former NASCAR driver. 3x Daytona champion status, presumed retired, inactive since 2007. Notable events. Severe crash during 2007. Southern 500, loss of wife and son in post-race highway accident. Withdrew from professional circuits. Vanished from public eye. A photograph was attached. A man in a white fire suit helmet under his arm. Bright eyes, confident grin. The same jawline, the same eyes. A ghost, just cleaner, younger, untouched by time and sorrow. Brooke leaned back in her chair. "My God," she whispered. "It's him." Memories stirred. Brooke had grown up in North Carolina. Her father was a race fan. Sunday afternoons meant lemonade lawn chairs and the TV humming in the background. Jack Turner had been the name people whispered like folklore. Fast hands, sharp instincts. A driver with fire in his heart and ice in his veins. He wasn't just a racer, He was art behind a wheel. Then came the crash. Then silence. Brooke remembered the news stories, the wreckage, the loss, and now he was in Edgewater, fixing her car in a borrowed coat with a little girl holding his hand. What happened to the legend? And more importantly, what could bring him back? That evening, Brooke stood in her office staring out at the skyline. The world looked so different at the top. Polished, distant, but that man in the garage had reminded her of something she didn't realize she missed. People who didn't ask for applause. People who showed up for others even when the world had broken them. Brooke whispered to herself. The world gave him a finish line he didn't choose. She picked up her phone. Trevor, yes, ma'am. I want to speak to him. Jack Turner. Privately. No press, no cameras, just us. You sure that's wise? No, she said, but it's necessary. 2 days later, she stood once again outside Summit Auto and Performance, the same garage where it had all started. The air smelled of rubber oil and early fall. Jack was under a Dodge Charger boot sticking out humming an old tune that might have once been Springsteen. She waited. He slid out, wiped his face, and looked at her. You again, he said. Not rude, not surprised. Just tired. I looked you up, she said. His jaw tensed. Jack Turner, she added. Daytona, Darlington, Talladega. He didn't move. I'm not here for a headline, she said. I'm here because I saw something that mattered, and I think you've still got more to give. He snorted. Lady, I'm just trying to keep my daughter fed and my head low. Seems to me, she said gently, you're trying to outrun something. Problem is men like you were born behind the wheel. He looked away, then wiped his hands. Whatever you're selling, he said, I'm not buying. Not anymore. She softened. I'm not selling anything. But if you ever want something different, a shot, a space, a chance to teach instead of disappear, my door's open. He didn't answer, but from behind him, a small hand tugged at Brooke's coat. Ellie. She looked up at Brooke, then down at the folded paper in her hands. Without a word, she placed it in Brooke's palm. A drawing Jack in a racing helmet standing tall in the middle of a racetrack made of stars. Her father, not as he was, but as she saw him. Brooke blinked, caught off guard by the lump rising in her throat. Jack glanced back and saw the picture. His face shifted. Come on, Ellie, he said quietly. But Ellie stayed there watching Brooke with those quiet, steady eyes. Brooke looked down at her. You're proud of him, huh? Ellie nodded. Brooke smiled gently. So am I. She knelt to Ellie's level. You take care of him, okay? He's special. Ellie gave the faintest smile, then took her dad's hand. Brooke stood back as they walked away, and for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since her own father died. Wonder. That night, Brooke placed the drawing on her desk. Not framed, just there. A reminder. Not of Jack Turner the legend, but of J.T., the man who listened to broken engines and raised a daughter who saw him as a king. And Brooke made a silent promise she would not let the world forget him again. The air smelled like dust and brake fluid. Brooke Hamilton stood at the edge of the garage, heels clicking against the concrete, but no one heard her over the sound of power tools and revving engines. Except him. Jack J.T. Turner looked up from the hood of an old Ford and met her gaze without surprise. You always show up unannounced, he asked, wiping his hands on a grease-streaked rag. I figured you weren't the kind of man who answers emails, Brooke replied, stepping closer. He gave her a half smirk, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. You figured right. A young mechanic passed between them, giving Jack a quick nod before rolling a tire to the back. Brooke watched the motion, then turned back to him. I came to talk, she said. Jack sighed. You've got 5 minutes. They sat on 2 overturned crates behind the garage, just out of sight from the chaos inside. A breeze stirred the dust. Somewhere, a cicada buzzed in protest. Brooke looked at him, closely lined face, calloused hands, hair more silver than black. He looked nothing like the man in those NASCAR posters from her childhood. and yet everything like the man who'd rebuilt her car with nothing but instinct and grace. She handed him a small paper cup of black coffee. "I did some digging," she said. Jack took the cup but didn't drink. Daytona, 03. Talladega, 04. Darlington. The crash. His fingers tightened around the cup knuckles, whitening. "I'm not here to drag your past into the light," she continued, "but I'm not going to pretend I don't know who you are." He didn't say a word. "I also know what it's like," she added quietly, "to lose everything and still be expected to function like nothing happened." Jack finally looked up. His eyes were hard, but not cruel. Just tired. "You don't know anything about what I've lost," he said, voice low. "You're right," she admitted, "but I saw something in your daughter's eyes. Pride and pain. That doesn't come from nothing." He stood, suddenly pacing a few steps before turning back to her. "What do you want from me, Brooke?" His voice wasn't angry. It was hollow. "Another viral video, a redemption arc for your brand. You want the broken man with a dead family to headline your corporate charity gala." Brooke stood too, not flinching. "I want you to stop hiding," she said simply. "I want to help you build something again. Not because of who you were, but because of who you still are." He let out a bitter laugh. "I'm a guy who sleeps in a church basement and fixes busted alternators for $50 and a slice of pie." "No," Brooke said. "You're a man who listens to machines like they're breathing. You made a BMW purr when a team of engineers couldn't even diagnose the issue. You're not just a mechanic, you're a whisperer." He shook his head. "I'm no one's savior." "I didn't say savior," she replied, softer now. "I said teacher." He blinked. "Look, I have funding," she continued. "Access, space. I want to build a vocational garage, real training, real jobs for vets kids aging out of foster care, people who've been counted out." Jack didn't respond. Ellie could be close to school art classes, Brooke added. No more sleeping in shelters, no more running. His face twisted. "You think this is about comfort? About money?" "No," she said. "I think this is about guilt." That landed. He turned his back to her, shoulders tight. Brooke stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. "You lost your wife, your son, and somewhere in that crash, you decided you didn't deserve anything good again. That fixing other people's broken things was the closest you were allowed to joy." Jack didn't turn around. "But your daughter doesn't see you that way," she whispered. "She sees a hero in coveralls." He was trembling now, just slightly. Brooke pulled something from her purse. It was the drawing Ellie had given her. Jack in a helmet standing tall on a racetrack of stars. Brooke laid it gently on the workbench beside him. "I don't need your answer today," she said. "But know this, whatever you think you've become, that little girl still believes you're made of fire." She paused. "And I'm beginning to think she's right." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Jack alone with a paper crown. He stood there for a long time. Long after the garage closed. Long after the sun dipped behind the trees. The only sound was the wind whispering through the rusted gutters. Jack reached for the drawing. His hands, those same hands that once gripped a steering wheel at 200 miles per hour, shook as he traced the crayon lines. He didn't cry, but something cracked. Back in the church basement that night, Ellie curled up on her sleeping bag holding a worn, stuffed rabbit with one button eye. Jack sat beside her, the drawing folded in his back pocket. "You gave her your picture," he said gently. Ellie looked up at him, blinking. Jack sighed, voice soft. "You think I'm still that guy?" She reached out and touched his hand, then nodded. "Just once." Jack looked away, swallowing hard. Maybe he whispered. Just maybe. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because for the first time in 17 years, Jack Turner allowed himself to imagine something that had once seemed impossible. That maybe the finish line wasn't behind him. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a track ahead. The morning came with the kind of southern humidity that made your shirt stick to your back before 9 a.m. JT was under the chassis of a rusty 99 pickup socket wrench and hand grease smudged across his forearm like war paint. Ellie sat cross-legged nearby, coloring on a flattened cardboard box with a stubby blue crayon. She drew a car today, sleek, fast, with a streak of lightning on the hood. "Daddy, what's faster?" she asked without looking up. A Cheetah or a McLaren Jack chuckled from beneath the truck. "Depends. The Cheetah's got instinct. The McLaren's got engineering." A new voice cut through the air, cold and precise. "I heard you're good with engines. Let's test that." The entire garage paused. A man in a tailored navy suit stood at the entrance. Late 40s. Rolex Italian shoes and an expression like he'd rather be anywhere else. His name was Carter Wallace, a venture capitalist known for devouring startups and spitting out gold. Behind him, a sleek black McLaren 720S sat purring, or rather coughing. The engine sputtered like it had a throat full of gravel. Jack slid out from under the truck, slowly standing up and wiping his hands on a rag. "And you are," he asked, unbothered. "Someone with money time and very little patience," Carter replied. "I've got an investor pitch in Charlotte in 3 hours. This thing decides to play dead halfway here." He gestured sharply at the McLaren. "Your team gets it running before 10 a.m. I'll write a check to Summit Auto's community garage proposal." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And if we don't?" "No harm, no check. I'll call a flatbed and catch a chopper. Either way, I get where I need to go." Ben, who had just arrived with his son cradled in his arms, exchanged a glance with Brooke. Jack Brooke said cautiously, "That car is—" "I know what it is," Jack said. Carter scoffed. "And I know what you are. Tick-tock miracle man. Let's see if the internet hype holds up in real life." Ellie stood up and tugged gently at her father's hand. He looked down. She didn't speak. She just nodded once, like she believed. Again. Jack circled the McLaren in silence, listening. He pressed his palm lightly against the hood. The metal was hot, angry hot. He closed his eyes. The rest of the garage watched in tense silence. Ben whispered to Brooke, "This is crazy. That engine's a nightmare. Even their own team in Woking couldn't trace the fault." Brooke didn't answer. She just stared. Jack opened the driver's side door and sat down. He didn't start the car. He listened. Then he whispered, barely audible, "Talk to me." His fingers moved slowly, deliberately over the dash, feeling for resonance, pressure, temperature. 3 minutes passed, then 5. He popped the hood and got to work. Time ticked like a metronome on speed. Carter Wallace paced behind the tool bench, glancing at his Rolex every 30 seconds. Brooke was on the phone prepping documents in case this gamble paid off. Ben held his son, watching Jack work with the intensity of a man watching a heart surgery. Ellie stood by a stack of tires, drawing the McLaren. Only in her version it had wings. Jack emerged from beneath the car face, streaked with sweat and motor oil. He grabbed a 9mm Torque wrench and slid beneath the engine bay one last time. He tightened one bolt. Then he stood. "Try it now," he called to one of the young techs nearby. The engine fired up, stuttered, coughed, then a purr, smooth, pure, like it remembered what it was born to be. Carter's eyes widened. He rushed over, popped open the throttle. The machine roared like a panther waking from sleep. "Holy hell," he muttered. Jack folded his arms. It wasn't the engine, he said. It was the dual-clutch sensor overheating the ECU loop. Gave a false error to the turbo feeds. "Impossible," Carter said. "You found that without a diagnostic tool." Jack shrugged. Didn't need one. Just listened. Carter stared at him, then pulled out his checkbook. "How much are you asking?" he said to Brooke without taking his eyes off Jack. Brooke smiled. "Enough to change lives." That afternoon, the second video dropped. This time it wasn't just a phone recording. Brooke had quietly hired a professional videographer who happened to be in the neighborhood. The edit was clean, dramatic, cinematic. The title, "He Fixed a 300K Supercar in 40 Minutes Without a Computer." Just a stethoscope and a soul. By sundown, it had 2.7 million views. Back at the church basement, Jack stared at the screen of Ben's phone in disbelief. People were commenting from Brazil, Scotland, Tokyo. One woman wrote, "My son gave up on mechanics after his stroke. He watched this and asked to go back to the garage today." Jack didn't smile. He looked at Ellie, who curled beside him on the cot holding her newest drawing. This time, it wasn't a race car. It was a building, with a big red sign that said Turner Garage. "Come as you are." He swallowed hard. "You really think we can do this?" he asked her softly. Ellie nodded. Then she picked up a crayon and wrote a single word at the bottom of her page. Yes. The motel air conditioner wheezed like it had asthma. Jack sat on the edge of the twin-bed, hands stained with grease shirt, damp with sweat and memory. The room smelled faintly of rust and cheap soap. Ellie was asleep, curled under a threadbare blanket, her chest rising and falling like the tide. A folded photo rested on his lap. The edges were frayed. The colors faded from sun and time. In it, a woman smiled through the driver's side window of a race car. Blonde. Freckles. Brave. And in her arms was a boy no older than Ellie was now holding a toy steering wheel like it was a trophy. Jack traced their faces with a calloused thumb. Then, slowly, he folded the picture and slid it back into his wallet. That ritual never got easier. He stood and stepped outside. The night hit him like a memory. Humidity. Diesel. The low throb of distant bass from the bar across the highway. It was all too familiar. The bar was nearly empty. Just two truckers nursing long necks and a jukebox coughing up old country songs like broken promises. Jack sat at the end of the counter staring at the bottle of wild turkey the bartender had just uncapped. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. The bartender poured, 1 inch, then 2. Jack stared at the glass. Outside, lightning blinked on the horizon. He reached out. Fingers trembled. But before he touched it, a voice cut through the room. Small. Tired. Daddy Jack turned. Ellie stood in the doorway barefoot in pajamas, her small hands gripping the handle of her sketchpad like a shield. The whole bar turned silent. She didn't cry, didn't scold, just walked up slowly and slid onto the stool beside him. She opened her sketchpad, flipped past pages of fast cars and flames and superheroes, and landed on a new drawing. 2 seats in a race car. The driver, Jack, with a helmet. And in the passenger seat, Ellie with a smile wide as the sky. Above them, she'd written one sentence in crayon, "We ride together, Daddy." Jack stared at it like it was scripture. The bartender, watching quietly, reached over and picked up the glass. He poured it down the sink without a word. Jack looked at Ellie. "Let's go home," he whispered. She nodded. Back in the motel room, Jack tucked her in, gently pulling the blanket up to her chin. She was asleep before he reached the light switch. He sat in the corner chair, turning the drawing over in his hands. He didn't deserve her. He didn't deserve the way she saved him without saying a word. But somehow, she was still here, still riding shotgun. Morning came with the sound of knocking. 3 short raps. Jack opened the door to find Brooke holding 2 coffees and a file folder. "I figured you'd be up early," she said, handing him one. Jack took it slowly. "Thanks." She held up the folder. "Blueprints? For the vocational garage. I pitched it to Carter after he landed his investor deal. He's all in." Jack blinked, still waking up. "You're not giving up, huh?" "Giving up isn't in my code base." Jack smirked. Brooke stepped inside, glancing at the bed where Ellie still slept, then back at Jack. "I heard about the bar last night," she said quietly. Jack's eyes darkened. "News travels fast. Ben called me. Said you walked out without taking a sip. That matters, Jack." He leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't planning to," he murmured. Brooke raised an eyebrow. Jack exhaled. "I wasn't planning not to, either." Brooke studied him. Then, without asking permission, she sat on the arm of the motel's single chair and opened the folder. There's a property downtown. Used to be a hardware store, big garage doors, lots of space in back. We could retrofit classrooms, install lifts, train vets, foster kids, anyone willing to learn. Jack watched her speak, eyes searching her face. "You really believe in this," he said. She looked up. "No," she said softly. "I believe in you." Silence thickened between them. Then Jack whispered, "I'm not used to that." Brooke smiled faintly. "You better get used to it. The world's watching, Jack, and your daughter's leading the front row." Later that day, Jack sat outside the garage with Ellie on his lap, sketchpad open between them. She handed him a crayon. "What should I draw?" he asked. Ellie looked at him, then pointed at his chest. Jack looked down. She drew a small heart right over where his scars were, the real ones, the silent ones. Not the kind doctors could see, the kind that whispered in the dark. She handed him the crayon again. His hand hovered. Then carefully he drew a matching heart on her. Same spot, same size. They sat like that in the sun, coloring nothing but air and healing. The building smelled like dust oil and resurrection. The old hardware store had been gutted, stripped to its bones. Exposed beams stretched like ribs overhead, and scattered sunlight poured in through broken glass. Where once there were shelves of paint and plumbing, now stood wide garage bays, steel workbenches, and the promise of something new. Jack stood in the center, hands on hips, staring at the mess. It was beautiful. Brooke stepped beside him, clipboard in hand, hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. But her eyes gleamed with something rare. "Hope?" "We've got funding for 6 lifts," she said, scanning the papers. 3 classrooms, a parts donation from Delmar Auto Supply, and Ben lined up a few counselors for the addiction recovery track. Jack whistled low. "Y'all move fast." Brooke smirked. "You fixed my BMW in 5 minutes. You're the one who started this tempo." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Didn't think tightening a bolt would turn into this." She looked at him, then not as a CEO but as a human being. "That wasn't just a bolt, Jack," she said softly. "That was a beginning." By the second week, the first group of students arrived. Some were barely out of high school, wide-eyed, raw shoulders tight with mistrust. A few were older veterans, men with haunted eyes and sleeves rolled high enough to hide scars or track marks. Jack greeted them all the same. Not with speeches, not with pity, but with a rag in one hand and grease on his shirt. "You're not here to be saved," he told them, voice firm but calm. "You're here to learn how to save yourselves. Engines don't care where you come from. They only care how you treat them." He paused, then added, "Same goes for people." One of the students, a boy named Leo, maybe 16, refused to meet anyone's eye. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat in the common room. But Jack noticed he never missed a class, and he always lingered by the same old Chevy truck in Bay 2. So one afternoon, Jack walked over holding 2 root beers, set one on the fender. "Mind if I join your silent protest?" Leo shrugged. Jack popped the cap, took a sip. 79. "Silverado," he said, nodding to the truck. "Used to have one. Same rust line along the door. Drove it until the frame cracked in half like a bad promise." Leo blinked. Still said nothing. Jack leaned back against the truck, arms crossed. "You know, people think engines are complicated," he said. "But they're not. Not really. They just want 3 things: fuel, air, and spark." He tapped the boy's chest lightly. "Same as us." Leo's lip twitched. Maybe a smirk, maybe just memory. Jack didn't push, didn't preach. He just sipped his root beer, eyes fixed on the old truck like it held all the world's wisdom under its hood. Elsewhere in the garage, Brooke managed operations like she was running a Fortune 500 company, which technically she still was, but she always made time to check in, to walk through the bays with her heels swapped for sneakers, hair still tied back, sleeves rolled up. "You're doing more than teaching mechanics," she told Jack one day. "You're giving people rhythm again. Structure. A second gear." Jack wiped sweat from his brow, glancing over the hum of the shop saws, Clank's laughter. "I'm not doing it alone," he said. She looked at him. Really looked. I know, she said. But they follow your heartbeat. Every day at 3:15 sharp, Ellie would arrive after school with her sketchpad and settle in the corner of the break room. She rarely spoke, but she watched everything. Every wrench turned, every hand lifted, every smile earned. She started drawing the garage as if it were alive. One day, Jack noticed a new piece taped to the wall. It showed the shop from above like a bird's-eye view, but every person was glowing slightly. Their hearts drawn as tiny engines, each one connected by little bolts and wires. Brooke stared at it beside him. She sees everything, she whispered. Jack nodded. She sees why we're doing it. By the 4th week, something shifted. The air felt different. Not just oil and sweat anymore, but momentum. A rhythm. One of the veterans, Luis, who hadn't spoken a full sentence since arriving, began mentoring a younger kid who'd stripped a bolt. Leo started arriving early. Brooke caught one of the recovering addicts reading a car manual aloud to himself like it was scripture. It was working. And yet, late one night after everyone had left, Jack sat alone on the lift platform staring up at the ceiling. Brooke entered quietly. Couldn't sleep. Jack shook his head. Sometimes I wonder what my boy would have thought of this place, he said. Brooke sat beside him. What was his name? Jack hesitated. Then Cole. She waited. He used to draw engines, just like Ellie, only his were made of candy. He thought if he designed the world's first sugar-powered car, no one would ever need gas again. Said it'd make the world sweeter. Brooke smiled through the ache in her throat. He would have loved this place, Jack. Jack nodded. He would have helped build it. The next morning, Jack opened class with something different. He stood in front of the whiteboard, hands slightly shaking. This isn't about fixing cars anymore, he began. It never was. He looked at the faces in front of him, bruised, battered, but listening. This garage is proof that broken things can run again. That busted pieces can still carry weight. That engines like people don't need perfection, they need understanding. He paused, and second chances. The room fell still. Then someone clapped, then another, until the whole shop echoed with the sound of hands. Jack didn't smile, he just breathed. In and out, like an engine finally finding idle after years of redlining. The storm rolled in fast, no warning, no courtesy. Just black clouds boiling over the Carolina sky like something furious had been unleashed. Thunder cracked overhead as the garage lights flickered. Jack looked up from under the hood of a rusted Civic. He knew this kind of storm. Not just the weather kind, but the kind that knocked on your door with bad news in its fists. His phone buzzed. Ben Reyes, guy new voicemail. He didn't even listen, just tapped call. Ben's voice came through tight and trembling. Jack, I need help. It's my son. Jack's spine straightened. What happened? We were heading home from the courthouse. Some guys, I think they followed us. I lost them, but they slashed my tires. We're stuck off Route 9 near Miller's Creek. And Theo's burning up. His fever's back. I can't get to a hospital. Jack didn't hesitate. I'm on it. Stay inside the car. I'll call you when we're close. He ended the call, turned and barked, I need everyone in Bay 1. Now. Within minutes, the garage was a flurry of motion. Rain battered the steel roof like 1,000 warning drums. But no one flinched. Luis grabbed the toolkits. Leo sprinted to check the mobile jack. Brooke arrived in her raincoat, already soaked. What's going on? Ben's stranded jack said. Car's out. Kid's sick. We've got maybe 90 minutes before that fever gets dangerous. Brooke didn't blink. What do you need? Jack turned to the student's voice, clear, commanding. This is not a drill. This is real. We've got one shot to get a mobile unit out there, fix the damage, and get that kid to a hospital. Leo raised a shaky hand. You want us? Jack nodded. I've been teaching you what to do when it matters. Well, he pointed toward the bay doors where lightning forked in the sky. This matters. Silence. Then Luis stepped forward. Let's roll. They loaded the garage van with tool spare tires, a portable heater, and Ellie's hand-knit blanket, she insisted. Jack drove. Luis navigated. Leo sat in the back organizing wrenches by size with trembling hands. Brooke stayed behind, managing dispatch via radio, her voice steady despite the static. The road to Miller's Creek was half washed out. Water streaked down the hills like silver veins. Visibility was a joke. But Jack didn't slow down. He gripped the wheel like it owed him something. Like this mission was more than just a favor, it was redemption roaring at 60 mph through a flood. They found Ben's car pulled to the shoulder, one wheel collapsed, hazard lights barely blinking. Jack parked in front, threw the van into park, and leapt into action. Ben burst out of the car, soaked to the bone. "He's in the back," he said. "Can't stop shaking." Jack ran to the back door, pulled it open, and froze. Theo's face was flushed, eyes glassy. His little fingers curled into fists, and his breath came in shallow wheezes. Jack didn't speak. He just reached out and held the boy's hand. "You're gonna be all right, little man. We've got you." Then he turned back to the team. "Leo, tires. Luis, heat pad and blanket. I'll get the engine up." The boys moved like clockwork. No second guessing. No panic. Just sweat mud and the rhythm of purpose. Rain poured down like judgment. Thunder boomed so loud it rattled the van windows. But no one backed away. Luis wrapped Theo in the warm blanket, placed the heater near his feet, and murmured soft Spanish lullabies under his breath. Leo, hands shaking at first, steadied as Jack knelt beside him. "Remember what I told you?" Jack asked, voice low. Leo nodded. "Thread the nuts like prayer beads. One at a time. No rush, no fear." Jack smiled. "Attaboy." Brooke's voice crackled through the radio ambulance en route. "ETA 25 minutes. Jack shouted over the storm, "That gives us 10 to get this thing moving." The lug nuts screamed as they came off. The new tire locked in place with a thud. Mud soaked their jeans. Oil streaked their faces. But the work never stopped. Jack checked the undercarriage, bent axle, cracked hose, fixable barely. He looked at Leo. "You think we can do this?" Leo swallowed. "No," then smiled. "But let's do it anyway." By the time the ambulance arrived, the car was rumbling, not perfect, but breathing. Jack carried Theo to the EMTs, handed him over gently, and watched as Ben climbed into the back eyes, full of tears. "You saved him," Ben whispered. Jack shook his head. "They did." He turned and pointed to the two grease-covered students standing under the rain, soaked to the bone but standing tall. This was their race. And they finished. Back at the garage, no one spoke much. Luis handed out hot chocolate. Leo sat in the corner, staring at his hands like he barely recognized them. Jack sat beside him. "You good?" Leo nodded. "I didn't freeze?" "No," Jack said. "You didn't. You rose." There was a long pause. Then Leo said, barely above a whisper, "Feels better than I thought it would. To be needed." Jack placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Get used to it." That night, as the last lights went off, Brooke locked up the office and stepped outside to find Jack sitting alone under the garage awning. She handed him a dry towel and sat beside him. For a while, they said nothing. Just listened to the fading rain. "You know what I realized tonight," Brooke finally said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "We didn't just build a garage. We built a lifeboat. And when the flood came, it floated." Jack looked out at the soaked concrete, the flickering neon sign that still read Turner Vocational Garage. And he smiled. "We're not fixing cars anymore," he said. "We're fixing people." Brooke nodded, her voice barely audible. "And they're fixing each other." The morning sun filtered through the smudged garage windows, casting long golden streaks across the oil-stained concrete. Someone had lit a cinnamon candle in the office, Ellie's idea, and the faint smell mixed strangely with motor grease and coffee. Jack J.T. Turner stood at Bay 3 helping Luis adjust a serpentine belt on an old Ford pickup. They worked in silence, the kind built from mutual trust and practiced rhythm. Then Brooke's voice echoed from the office doorway. "They're here." Jack didn't look up. Who she stepped into the light holding her tablet like a shield. CBS. Morning segment. Stories that heal. "They want to film you." Jack wiped his hands on a rag. "I told you, not interested." Brooke walked closer. "They don't want a puff piece, Jack. They want the truth. What happened with Ben and Theo made national rounds. People are calling you a hero." "I'm not." Jack said, voice flat. "I'm just a guy who used to drive fast and now fixes busted things. That's exactly why they need to hear from you." Jack sighed, eyes fixed on the truck. "Brooke, the last time I let cameras near me, it destroyed everything." By noon, the garage was half-dressed in nervous energy. Students swept and organized tools like it mattered more than air. Brooke had convinced Jack to at least meet the crew, just meet, she'd emphasized. Ellie peeked through the blinds of the office, watching the big white van pull into the gravel lot. She clutched something in her hand, a small toy microphone scuffed with glitter stickers. "Do you think Daddy will talk?" she whispered to Brooke. Brooke knelt beside her. "I don't know, honey. But sometimes when your heart's full, the only way to keep it from bursting is to let it speak." Ellie nodded slowly, then held out the toy mic. "He used to talk to me through this, when I was too scared to answer." The camera crew set up quickly. A host with perfect posture and a voice like velvet extended her hand to Jack. "Mr. Turner, it's an honor. We're not here to exploit you, just to listen. Whenever you're ready." Jack stared at the interview chair they'd set up near the garage entrance. Same spot where he'd first fixed Brooke's BMW. Same spot where Ellie first held his hand like it meant something bigger than survival. He looked back at the students, Leo, Louis, Jasmine, all standing silently behind the workbench, watching him like pit crew waiting for a signal. He looked at Ellie standing in Brooke's arms, toy mic clutched to her chest. And then he exhaled. "I'll do it." The lights flipped on. The cameras rolled. The host smiled gently. Jack Turner, NASCAR champion, disappeared from the spotlight in 2007, re-emerged not with a comeback, but with a cause. "Tell us what brought you back." Jack looked directly into the camera, and for once he didn't flinch. "I used to race for trophies," he began, voice low but firm. "But when the spotlight goes out, when the crowd's gone and your name's forgotten, all that's left is the question. What did it mean?" He paused. "I lost my wife and son in a wreck I should have seen coming. I lost myself right after. For years, I didn't want to be found. I just wanted to fix engines, because I couldn't fix my past." The host leaned in. "What changed?" Jack turned toward the bay where Ellie now stood alone holding the toy microphone. "That," he said. "That little girl. She found me in the wreckage. Not with words, but with presence. With hope. With quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, I could still be useful." Brooke watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, eyes wet. She had never seen Jack like this, stripped of armor, speaking not for applause, but from truth. And the crew silent. Not a single phone buzzed. Not a single cough. Jack continued, eyes fixed on the lens. "People think racing's about speed. It's not. It's about timing. It's about knowing when to brake and when to let go." He looked down at his calloused hands. "Here at Turner Garage, we don't just fix cars. We fix people. One engine, one conversation, 1 second chance at a time." He looked up. "And we don't ask for names or pasts. We just ask one question. What do you want to build now?" After the segment wrapped, the crew clapped quietly, no instructions, no prompting. Just spontaneous respect. The host wiped her eyes. That was real. Jack nodded, already removing his mic. It was overdue. As the crew packed up, Ellie ran to him, holding out the toy microphone. "You did it, Daddy," she said softly. Jack took the toy, tapped it twice, and whispered, "Thanks for the loan." Then he knelt beside her. "Can I tell you a secret?" Ellie leaned in. "Today, I didn't feel like a broken man. I felt like your father, and that's worth more than every checkered flag I ever crossed." Later that night, the team gathered in the garage office watching the aired segment on a dusty, flat screen. The anchor ended the piece with, "In a world that glorifies speed, sometimes the greatest victories happen when we slow down and rebuild from the wreckage." Leo looked at Jack, grinning. "You're kind of famous again." Jack chuckled. "Let's just hope the fame brings more engines than egos." Luis raised his cup of soda. "To second chances." Brooke added, "To finish lines that matter." And Ellie. She curled into Jack's lap, her voice small but clear. "To garages that feel like home." The morning sky over Edgewater was a soft, forgiving blue like a fresh page waiting for a story worth telling. Rows of folding chairs lined the newly paved lot outside Turner Garage, flanked by blue and white streamers that fluttered like prayer flags in the wind. The old sign, once rusted and forgotten, had been replaced with a gleaming plaque that read, "Turner Garage and Vocational Center, where second chances start their engines." Below it, etched in metal, 2 crossing flags, one checkered, one pure white. Brooke adjusted the microphone on the makeshift podium as the crowd began to gather. Press townsfolk, former students, and even a few strangers who had seen Jack's CBS interview and driven hours just to say thank you. Jack stood near the garage door, dressed not in coveralls but a clean button-up shirt and jeans, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked out at the growing sea of faces, hopeful, grateful, curious. Beside him, Ellie wore a white sundress with tiny oil wrench patterns embroidered along the hem. Ben's wife had sewn it just for the occasion. In her hands, she clutched a pair of ceremonial scissors far too big for her tiny frame. "You nervous, Jack?" asked gently, crouching beside her. Ellie gave him a look part smile, part steel. Then she whispered, "Not as nervous as you." Jack laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fair enough." Brooke stepped up to the mic as the crowd hushed. Her voice, calm but strong, rolled out over the lot. "When we started this journey, it wasn't about changing the world. It was about helping one man, one little girl, one broken engine." She looked back at Jack and Ellie. "But sometimes, when you fix the right engine, it keeps running into places you never expected." Light laughter, a few nods. She continued, "This garage isn't just a building. It's a promise that no matter what life has wrecked in you, there's a space here for rebuilding." Applause rolled through the crowd like a wave, and now Brooke added with a warm smile, "We'd like to invite the true heart of this place, Miss Ellie Turner, to help us cut the ribbon." The crowd turned. Jack gently nudged Ellie forward, but she didn't move right away. Instead, she reached into her small side pocket and pulled out a drawing fresh pencil on rough paper. It was the garage, but not just any version. There were smiling faces drawn with exaggerated eyes, students, mentors, families. A big sun shone overhead, but inside the sun was a smaller face, Jack's, smiling from the center. She handed it to Brooke. "For you," she whispered, "so you never forget." Brooke blinked rapidly, then knelt and hugged her. "I won't, I promise." Then Ellie turned, walked forward, and lifted the scissors with both hands. Jack's voice rang out gently behind her. "All right, baby girl. You ready?" She nodded, and with the help of Brooke and Jack on either side, the ribbon snapped in two. Cheers erupted like fireworks. Music played. A local bluegrass group volunteered their set. Kids ran between tire stacks converted into obstacle courses. The aroma of pulled pork sandwiches drifted from a food truck out front. But the real magic was in the conversations. Luis showed his mother how he could disassemble and reassemble a carburetor in under 5 minutes. Jasmine sat with a young girl from the foster program, teaching her how to recognize a flat battery. Ben Reyes stood by his truck, little Theo in his arms, chatting with a man about launching a legal clinic right next door. Jack wandered through it all quietly, not as the center of attention, but as the man people wanted to speak to, not because of his past, but because of what he stood for now. Carter Wallace, the venture capitalist with the fixed McLaren, approached him with a firm handshake. "I've seen hundreds of pitches," Carter said, "but nothing as clear as this." Jack tilted his head. "What's that A place where people matter more than metrics?" Jack chuckled. "Don't get me wrong, we still track oil changes." Carter laughed, then grew serious. "We're starting a grant program for hands-on trade mentorships. I want your garage to be our pilot." Jack blinked. "You serious?" Carter nodded. "Dead serious." Jack looked around. "You'd be helping a lot of folks who never got a finish line." Carter patted his shoulder. "Then let's build them one." As the sun began to dip, golden light pooled across the parking lot like warm honey. Brooke found Jack sitting on the tailgate of an old Chevy, sipping sweet tea and watching Ellie sketch something on the sidewalk with chalk. She joined him silent for a long moment. "I almost didn't stop that day," she finally said. "Back when you fixed my BMW." Jack smirked. "Yeah, you didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat. I was in a season where I didn't believe in detours." He nodded. "Funny how the best roads don't show up on any map." They sat in companionable silence. Then Brooke reached into her bag and handed him a sealed envelope. Jack looked at the return address, NASCAR. He raised a brow. "What is this?" "They want you back. As a senior coach, strategy consultant. You'd be in charge of developing next-gen drivers." Jack ran his thumb along the edge of the envelope. "It's tempting." But he looked out at Ellie, now surrounded by 3 younger kids all drawing beside her. "My race is here now." Brooke smiled. "Good, because we're just getting started." As the sky faded to purple, a photo was taken, one that would later hang above the front desk in a simple wood frame. Jack, Brooke, Ellie, and the first class of Turner Garage apprentices all smiling beneath the new sign. And below it, in bold, hand-painted letters, "You don't have to be whole to begin again." The garage was quiet in the golden hush of evening. Not silent, the kind of quiet that holds breath as if the building itself were listening. Inside the private bay Jack had claimed for himself, tucked away in the far right corner, a single light buzzed overhead. Tools lined the walls in perfect rows, all clean and sharp, but unused today. Jack sat on a low wooden stool, elbows on knees, watching his daughter. Ellie was stretched across the concrete floor, surrounded by colored pencils and a half-finished sketch. She drew slow, purposeful lines, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. On the paper, a race car. Not sleek and soulless like the corporate designs he used to drive, but vibrant, almost childlike, with streaks of blue, green, and orange. In the front seat, a man with salt and pepper stubble smiled beneath his helmet. And beside him in the passenger seat, a little girl with bright eyes and wind in her hair. Jack swallowed hard. He didn't speak. He didn't want to interrupt the sacred rhythm of her drawing. But his heart beat with something thick and warm, something close to peace. For the first time in years, maybe longer, he realized he wasn't running anymore. The sound of soft heels echoed in the bay. Brooke appeared in the doorway, dressed in denim and a North Carolina Tech sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. In her hand was a white envelope. "You two make quite the team," she said gently. Ellie looked up and smiled, then turned her drawing so Brooke could see. "It's for Daddy's wall." Jack chuckled. "That's going to make the rest of the shop jealous." Brooke stepped closer and held out the envelope. "This came by courier. Thought I should deliver it myself." Jack took it, frowning at the familiar logo. "NASCAR. You keep saying no," she said, voice playful. "But they keep asking." He opened it slowly, scanned the contents. They wanted him again, this time to keynote at the National Racing Academy, to mentor young drivers, share his story, be the face of what it meant to come back from the edge. "They don't give up easy," Jack muttered. "They think you've got something to say." He looked at Brooke, then at Ellie, now humming softly as she shaded in the sky behind their illustrated race car. Jack folded the letter neatly and slid it back into the envelope. "I already said it." Brooke raised an eyebrow. Jack gestured to the garage around them, to the laughter still echoing faintly from the vocational wing where students had stayed late to fix an old Mustang together. "This is the story," he said. "Not the crash, not the wins. This, the second lap." Brooke smiled, then sat beside him on the stool. There was a silence between them, not heavy, not awkward, the kind that belongs to people who fought their battles and chosen not to hide the scars. Finally, Brooke whispered, "What if your finish line wasn't the end, just the beginning of a new track?" Jack looked at her, really looked, and for a moment the ache inside him softened into something almost unbearable. Hope. Later that night, after Ellie had fallen asleep in the passenger seat of the truck, Jack walked Brooke to her car. The lot was mostly empty now. The moon hung above the town like a watchful eye, and the air smelled of grease and cedar. Brooke paused before opening her car door. "You never told me what made you walk into that garage that first day." Jack smiled. "I didn't walk in for the car." Brooke blinked. "No," he shook his head. "I walked in because Ellie said she was hungry. I had a wrench in my bag and hope in my pocket. Figured maybe I could trade one for the other." Brooke stared at him, lips parting slightly. And now Jack looked back toward the garage. "Now I fix more than engines." He stepped forward, gently touched her hand. "You saved me, Brooke, in ways you probably don't even know." Brooke's voice was barely a breath. "You saved me, too." They stood there, inches apart, not needing to define it. Not tonight. Because sometimes healing doesn't need a label. Sometimes it just is. The next morning, Jack arrived early. The sun hadn't yet cleared the trees, and the garage was still cool with the breath of dawn. He walked to the far wall, the space Ellie had claimed as Daddy's memory spot. He hung her new drawing in a wooden frame right beneath the black and white photograph he'd kept hidden for years. In the photo, his wife, his son, and a much younger Jack. The three of them smiled against the backdrop of Daytona Speedway arms wrapped tight around each other. He touched the frame gently, then whispered, "Took me a while." His voice cracked, but he didn't look away. "But I finally found the finish line worth crossing." He stepped back, took in the wall, one picture of the past, one picture of the present, side by side. Then he grabbed a broom, whistled quietly, and started sweeping the floor. A janitor again, a teacher, a father, a man rebuilt not from fame, but from love. Sometimes, the strongest engines are the ones we rebuild inside ourselves. And sometimes all it takes is a little spark, a daughter's smile, a stranger's faith, a chance to begin again. If this story touched your heart in any way, if it reminded you of the power of second chances, or the quiet strength of a father's love, I'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, your state, or your country. In the comments, let's see how far this story travels and how many hearts it reaches. If you'd like more stories like this, stories of healing hope and the quiet heroes among us, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every click, every share helps this little corner of the internet shine a little brighter. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending time with this story. In a noisy world, the fact that you stayed means everything. Until next time. Keep believing, keep rebuilding, and never underestimate the miles a good heart can go.